Hi, I'm Jackie of Stitching Across the Globe, and welcome to week 4 of the Slea Head Quilt Along. This week we're going to start sewing. You might have started sewing last week, and that's totally fine, but this week I'm going to show my tips and tricks with you for sewing all your beautiful fabrics into your units and your blocks. Let's get started. So now I'm ready to start sewing. I have all my blocks stacked in sets in the pairs like I showed you last week, and then I've got my A and my J sashing, which I'm just going to place underneath my table for easy access. So I like to chain piece. I'm going to start with a leader, and that's why I like to chain piece, so that I don't have to have a leader and an ender for every single piece. I can just chain them through. And I do that by sewing them in pairs per block. So I've got my C set. They'll have a J sashing in between, so I'm just going to start with one of those. I like to do my sashing on top. So I know that those are a set, but I need another piece in order to chain piece. So I have my D's, which get an I sashing in between. For these smaller pieces, I don't use pins. I use pins for the bigger pieces, but this is totally personal preference. What are you the most comfortable with? If you're comfortable pinning it, by all means, go ahead and pin it. I just advise that you don't sew over your pins. I just personally don't like to sew over my pins. And then I've got my third set for this block with another J sashing. And I prefer to sew the smaller piece first. I find it's just easier that way for me. So you can see I kind of have my sets laid out here for my block. So now I'm going to start snipping from the back. I've got my leader that I can just set aside. That's my first set. That's my second set. And then that's the piece that's still in the needle. So then I can come in here and grab these. I like to do my sashing on top. So I'm just going to flip these to line them up. Like I said previously, if you're more comfortable pinning it, by all means pin it. It's whatever you're comfortable with at this stage. And if you're not comfortable chain piecing, feel free to do them separately so that you don't get your blocks orders mixed up. Snip my next one off, which goes there. And again, I like to do my sashing on top. Oops. These longer pieces can be a little bit more fiddly. And the reason I don't pin with the smaller ones is they're small enough that I can pretty much hold the whole piece with my fingers. It's when they get outside the range of my fingers that I like to pin. And this is why I do the C block before the B block for this set, is it's easier to put the smaller piece on top, and then it's easier for me to line them up with the sashing on top. Now I could snip all of these and take them out of the machine and start with a new leader if I wanted to start my next block fresh. Or I can, so I know these are the A piece that go with this guy. I'm just going to set them aside. Or I can just jump straight into my next block with my two C set there. Put my sashing on top. Snip this guy off, and this goes with the previous block I was just working on. So now I've got my A block, my C set, my D set, and my BC set. And that's one full block that I can set aside and take to my pressing station. So once we have our pairs sewn together, we'll press the sashing. The way I like to do that is we're going to be pressing towards the sashing. So I like to press from the front, and I just kind of lift this top piece and nose the nose of my iron nudge it in there, and that'll press it, and then I flip and do the other side. And then that, see, I didn't quite lay down, so I like to do the back next and just kind of make sure that I get those laid down. And then I'll hit it from the front. And that's ready for its next piece of assembly. So again, I start it from the front first, and I just lift up this piece and nudge the nose of my iron in there. You got to be careful not to go too far because it'll press the next seam in the wrong direction. You got to flip it and go again. And then I do a quick pass on the back, and then I press it flat on the front so it's got nice crisp seams. So you'll just do that with all your sets, and then we'll continue sewing. Now that we've got our pairs sewn and pressed, it's time to attach the G and H sashing. So at this point, you're going to want to look at your pictures or at the layout diagrams because it does matter which side the sashing is attached to, whether you sew it to this side or this side, because it will change the direction of these. So I just went through and I marked all mine with a pin on the side that the sashing gets done on, and that way I don't have to keep stopping and looking at my pattern. And so with this length of sashing and longer, I do like to pin just to make sure I'm lined up. So I will pin on either side. I'll start on one side, and then I skip directly to the other side. And then I'll just kind of lay it out and let it smooth, and then I'll stick a pin right there in the middle. And then I'm ready to stitch this piece. And I just pin them one at a time, and I also like to chain piece the sashing. So I'll start with my leader. I'll put this bad boy in, and I don't like to sew over my pins, so I just pull them as I sew, keep my pin cushion right next to me. Now this, because you've got your seam sewn either way, on my machine anyways, the second one likes to catch on my feed dogs and flip out. So just kind of be aware of that when you're sewing, and watch your seams. They stay laying nice and flat, and they stay pressed towards that center sashing piece. Next one, and again I pinned the side that I want the sashing on because it does affect your final layout. The sashing will either be here or here, so you want to make sure you do it on the right side. So I have mine marked with this little pin, and I'm going to pin this the same way. I'm going to start on one side and get that lined up, pin it. I'm going to skip directly to the far side, get that lined up, and pin it. And since this one's a little bit longer, again, I'll just lay it out, let it lay flat, make sure my edges are lined up. I'll throw two pins in it instead of just one in the center because it's a bit longer. Then I'll just chain piece it behind this next one. Pulling my pins as I go. And ensuring my seams here stay flat. And I'll just sew through all of my pairs that same way, marking with my marked pins, sew my sashing, and I'll just chain piece through all my sashing, and then we'll be ready to assemble the final block. When pressing the sashing on the longer sashing on your sets, the premise is the same. I like to go from the front and just nudge the nose of my iron in there, but you got to be a little bit more careful because your fingers are closer to the heat. So just watch out for your fingers there, and then you just press it nice and flat, and there we have it. And the longer pieces are the same. So this piece has got a little less width, and so your fingers can be a little bit close to the iron, so just be really cautious of not burning yourself there. and we'll just press that nice and flat. And then our third piece for this block, same premise. I just feel like when I press from the front, because I can kind of nudge against that seam, it gives it more flat. Sometimes when I press it from the back, I end up with this piece folded under, or it's not quite pressed nice and against the seam. I feel like I get a better press right against my seam when I press it from the front there. And now we're ready to start assembling. Now that we've got that done, we've only got 3 seams left on our blocks. So I'm just gonna kind of lay them out here. It'll end up going together right like that. So this one we'll have to sew seam, press, sew seam, press, sew seam, press. So I'll just start with this. I like to sew with my sashing on top, and I'm just gonna pin it the same way that I pinned it when I sewed it to my CC pair. I'm gonna pin at either end, lay it flat, pin it in the center, run my leader through my machine. And the way each block goes together, you consult the diagrams in the pattern, because they all go together a little bit different. And if you're comfortable, you can chain piece all the blocks in between the blocks, or you can do one at a time, sewing and pressing. Whichever is at your comfort level is just fine. Now I'm gonna press this and I'll be right back. As you iron these bigger pieces, it's the same premise I used before. I like to iron from the front. And so I'm gonna have the sashing above, and I'm gonna lift, and then I'm just gonna nose in with my iron from the front, get that seam nice and crisp. And then I like to hit it from the back to make sure those lay real flat. And then once more from the front to make sure we're nice and flat. And I could actually see that there. It was crinkling a little bit. So just watch out when your edges don't want to behave. Now there's the piece I just sewed. And then this goes on the side. And again, I'm just going to flip it on top. So I'm sewing with my sashing on top. And I'm going to pin it the same way that I pinned it to the long piece on either end. And then lay it flat. Sometimes you just got to give it a little shake. I'm going to stick 2 pins in this piece since it's a bit longer. And now here, because my bottom piece does have these seams, so just make sure that be cautious as they go under your feed dogs, that they stay flat, and then you're not ending up with this seam twisted and switched, because you'll end up with a little lump in your quilt, which is not the end of the world. But just if you're cautious of that, it just saves you a little bit of time later. And that is why we use leaders. It ate my fabric. I am back with a different block. So I'm at the same stage here. I'm just gonna flip this long side. So word of caution, don't rush and skip your leaders. I had to seam rip where it tried to suck my fabric into the machine, and I had to completely rethread my machine just to make sure that it was all still threaded right and running good. So if your machine likes leaders like mine does, don't skimp on them. Again, a little shake. The double pins. Make sure that seam the seam here is laid flat. I'm gonna send my leader right back through my machine before I even get up. So now I'm gonna go press this so that this is nice and flat. And now I'm gonna sew the final piece onto this block. And again, each block will be a little bit different, and depending on your layout, whether you chose your own layout or used one of the diagrams in the pattern, this is the part where you just need to be making sure that you've got your pieces in the right place and that you're happy with the layout. So this is definitely the section to just be verifying. I'm just gonna pin on either end so I know my ends are all lined up. And I'm gonna lay it nice and flat. Make sure my sides are lined up there. Throw a couple more pins in. And the final seam before a completed quilt block. Again, check these seams on the back to make sure your machine's not flipping them up so that you get a nice smooth flat seam. I'm gonna give that a press. And I'm on to my final block seam. I'm gonna iron it from the front, just nudging into that sashing. I'm gonna flip it, make sure that lays nice and flat on the back. Hit it from the front one more time. And we've got a completed quilt block. By the end of this week, you're gonna have some beautiful completed quilt blocks. I hope you share them on Instagram with the hashtag Slea Head Quilt Along and tag me at Stitching Across the Globe. Alternatively, you can send them to me in an email at quilts@stitchingacrosstheglobe.com. Next week, we get to finish our whole quilt top. I can't wait to see you there.